You're listening to the Last Signal Radio. 1 month after the nuclear war, the sky is a permanent bruise streaked with gray and orange smoke. From distant fires, the wind carries ash. From across continents, countries that once argued now lie in silence. Cities burned to glass and concrete. The borders that people fought over mean nothing. The weapons meant to protect became the instruments of annihilation. Every flash in the clouds marks a strike, remembered or uncounted. Radiation drifts across oceans invisible and relentless. The ground is cracked and blackened. Where bombs hit hardest plains that used to feed millions, our poisoned soil turns to powder. Dust climbs into the air and never settles. The rivers that flowed through multiple nations carry everything dead in their currents. Water tastes of metal and heat. The oceans churned for weeks after the initial blasts, bringing debris from faraway shores. The mountains, once proud and permanent, now smoke from fissures ignited by shock waves and residual heat. Valleys filled with ash and fallen trees, like broken skeletons of what was once vibrant life forests that survived initial strikes, now lie hollowed out, their trunks charred black. Branches twisted and brittle. Wildlife that once thrived in the safety of isolation vanished or mutates in isolated pockets. Birds are absent, the silence of their absence echoing over desolate fields. Animals flee or die in waves. Radiation seeps into soil, water, and air. Invisible yet pervasive rivers that once supported cities carry a thick metallic stench and floating debris from both human and natural destruction. Remnants of roads, bridges, and towns litter the water, carrying twisted metal, charred wood, and the occasional skeletal remains of what could not escape the fire. The wind carries smells of burned cities, melted plastics, and scorched earth over thousands of miles, drifting like a warning through continents where no one survives to hear it. Even hills and plains far from the initial impact bear marks of heat waves and shock waves. The soil cracks and warps under lingering radiation. Small fires smolder in abandoned forests and grasslands, releasing more smoke into an already darkened sky. Clouds hang low, heavy with ash, turning every sunrise into a dim, filtered glow. The sun barely pierces the layers of dust and chemical particulates. The temperature swings violently. Heat waves strike places where frost should be. Acid rains fall unpredictably, leaving landscapes corroded. The oceans are restless, their surface rough and irregular waves carrying heat, debris, and radioactive particles far beyond coastlines. Ships that drifted or sank remain as floating reminders of human presence and failure. Islands and harbors scattered with debris reflect the unnatural stillness of life that no longer thrives. The air hums with radiation, a low vibration felt through the body more than heard, a constant pulse of invisible energy reminding every creature and every surviving human that nothing is untouched. The cities that once bustled with life lie flattened or warped into black glass ruins, streets fused with vehicles, walls melted into impossible angles, and ash piles over what remains skyscrapers, skeletal shadows of their former selves. The sound of movement is gone. Replaced by wind whistling through hollow shells of civilization, the rivers now carve through what was once infrastructure, carrying ash and debris into other regions, as if trying to cleanse the land, the forests and plains, cities and mountains. Rivers and oceans all bear the memory of the war in every scar, every fissure, every darkened pool of water. Even 1 month in the smell of smoke and metal is permanent in the air, in the water, in the soil, in the lungs of anyone who survives far beyond the impact zones. The world is not dead yet, but it is suspended in a frozen, gray permanence. Life struggles in tiny hidden pockets where radiation is lower, water less poisoned, soil more forgiving. But everywhere else, the imprint of humanity's weapons is absolute, unrelenting, and permanent. The ash continues to drift endlessly, turning the horizon gray. The oceans, churned and toxic, reflect the muted sunlight back into the sky, as if the planet itself refuses warmth. The silence is immense, interrupted only by the occasional collapse of weakened structures or the hiss of radiation escaping fissures. The mountains, valleys, rivers, plains, and coasts all carry the memory of fire and destruction. The sky itself, bruised and heavy, seems to hang over the planet like a warning to anything that might attempt to. The sky holds the smell of fire still burning in hidden pockets. Forests that spanned countries are gone, trees snapped, bark charred, leaves incinerated. Animals that survived the first strikes flee or die in waves. The bird song that once crossed borders is now extinct. The mountains smoke from impact craters that scar continents. Sunlight struggles through clouds heavy with fallout. Shadows are distorted on the ground, making familiar landscapes alien. Even the wind is hesitant. It moves only to remind everything of what was lost. Power grids are obliterated, communications gone, food supplies collapsed, starvation spreads silently like another weapon. Famine follows destruction like a shadow. The ruins of capitals lie in smoke and ash, hospitals flattened, schools gone. No one counts the dead anymore. The numbers are meaningless. The silence is complete, except for the hum of radiation everywhere. The rivers that once carried life now run thick and metallic, dragging debris, ash, and the occasional skeletal remains downstream. Currents carrying poison across lands that once fed millions. Cities lie hollowed and twisted, streets fused with rubble. Vehicles melted into the ground, bridges toppled into rivers like broken teeth. Factories and ports gutted, chimneys blackened, rail lines severed. Networks of power and communication reduced to ash and steel, twisted into impossible shapes. Smoke and dust fill the valleys for miles, carrying the acrid smell of burned plastic, melted asphalt, and scorched earth. Through the plains, wind picks up debris like confetti from a world that no longer celebrates anything. Forests reduced to skeletons creak and moan as charred trunks sway weakly in the gusts. Animals too weak to flee lie in shallow graves or drift in streams. The horizon glows faintly from fires that burn endlessly, where no human hand can reach. The mountains release plumes of ash from hidden fissures, releasing chemical tang into the air. Every rock fractured by shock waves, every slope marked by the heat of fire. Sunlight filters weakly through thick smoke, casting an unnatural orange haze that makes distances impossible to gauge. Shadows stretch and warp, turning familiar landscapes into something hostile, unfamiliar, alien. Even the wind seems hesitant to move, carrying whispers of what once was, touching nothing, stirring nothing except ash. The oceans churn far beyond the coasts, waves carrying radioactive particles and debris, dragging the remnants of humanity across thousands of miles. Tide lines thick with ash and burned matter. The smell of death lingers in the air, and on the water the cities that survived the initial blasts slowly collapse into themselves, weakened by fire, radiation, and neglect. Walls crumble, roofs fall, and entire blocks vanish beneath rubble. The sound of movement is gone, replaced by the whisper of wind through hollowed-out shells of civilization. The earth itself groans occasionally as fissures open, releasing hot steam and debris into the already poisoned air. Nothing moves without caution. Even the sky itself seems heavy, bruised and oppressive, as if it remembers the fire and carries it forever. The silence is absolute, except for the constant low hum of radiation. A pulse felt in the bones, reminding everything that nothing is untouched, nothing is safe, and nothing will ever be the same. The planet itself bears witness to the destruction written into every landscape, every river, every forest, every mountain, every ruined street, every breath, every step, every glance reminds the survivors of what was lost and what may never return. Even places untouched by bombs carry its taste in air, and water countries that once fought for supremacy are now indistinguishable in ruin alliances shattered by fire. Mistrust burned out by mutual devastation borders only exist on maps that will never be used. The Earth itself seems to hesitate in the aftermath, as if waiting for something impossible to arrive. Volcanoes that had been sleeping erupt in response to the shock waves, lava spilling slowly across ash-covered plains. Rivers of molten rock, consuming what little greenery remained, forests near volcanic slopes, charred instantly by heat and fire, clouds of ash billowing into skies already heavy with smoke. The trembling of the earth shakes abandoned cities and towns, collapsing walls and splitting streets, fissures opening in what was once farmland, swallowing buildings and roads into yawning cracks. The oceans rise and fall unpredictably. Tidal waves triggered by distant impacts, smashing into coastlines, debris and sediment carried miles inland, reshaping beaches, cliffs, and settlements into landscapes unrecognizable. Even the wind seems cautious, heavy with dust and chemical residue. It moves over plains and valleys, scattering ash and the remains of human structures into patterns that seem deliberate. Almost mournful rivers run thick with poison and sediment, their currents carrying fragments of civilization stones, metal, wood. The skeletal remains of creatures caught in the blast far from their homes. The air smells of sulfur and metal, a tang of death and radiation lingering in every breath. Small animals scuttle in the shadows, avoiding open ground, surviving in isolated pockets where radiation is lower or vegetation somehow persists. Birds are silent, their calls absent, as if the world itself has silenced them. Mountains smolder with hidden fires, smoke rising from fissures, and impact craters turning the sky into a palette of gray, orange, and black shadows distort familiar terrain, making valleys look like chasms and forests like walls of fire. The sun struggles to break through dense clouds of ash and dust, each ray filtered into a dim, pallid light. The silence is immense, but alive with the subtle hum of radiation pulsing through the land water, soil and air carrying the memory of fire and destruction. Everything touched by the war remembers, even in places that never saw a blast. The earth is scarred, trembling, waiting, responding. The planet itself reshaped by human folly and the sheer force of unleashed fire. Its surface forever altered its rhythms, disrupted its future. Uncertain. Cities on coastlines have been reshaped by fire, and sudden tremors seize, reclaiming structures that had been centuries-old, waves crashing over foundations, dragging debris far inland, or pulling it back into water. Streets and harbors melted, or fractured buildings, swallowed by the tides. The skeletal remains of docks and piers jutting out at impossible angles. Like broken bones, the climate has shifted violently. Storms that once came once a year now appear unpredictably, like sudden punishments, tearing across plains and coasts in minutes. Uprooting what little remains, dust clouds from multiple blasts circle the planet, dimming the sun into a weak, colorless disk. The light that reaches the ground, pale and filtered. Temperatures swing unpredictably, scorch one region, while freezing another. Crops fail where they remain, soil poisoned, and infertile seeds sprout, only to wither. Heat waves and radioactive rains make survival arbitrary. The seasons meaningless, the world's memory is marked in scars across nations. Every bomb left a signature. Every conflict, a permanent wound. Even remote lands bear evidence of human destruction. 1 month in the human footprint is barely visible, yet its echoes dominate the landscape. The places people fled are only charred outlines of their ambition. Abandoned cities, collapsed homes, factories turned to twisted metal rivers like veins carry the burden of the war, water thick with sediment, ash and chemical poison, dragging remnants of life downstream. Oceans are heavier, roiling, carrying debris and radiation far beyond impact zones. Clouds hang low across continents, heavy with fallout, sulfur, and ash. The earth waits in a slow, poisoned breath, every gust of wind, a reminder of absence, of everything lost and nothing recovered. The mountains are scarred from shockwaves, their craters still glowing faintly in hidden fissures. The forests are skeletal, brittle, and silent. Even animals move cautiously, avoiding open ground. The sky itself seems bruised, swollen with the memory of fire and radiation. The silence is immense and alive, punctuated only by the hiss of fissures releasing steam, the creak of failing structures, the pulse of radiation flowing through soil. Water and air everywhere. The same story is written in glass, in steel, in ash. The remnants of humanity reduced to traces in rubble. The faint smell of metal and smoke, lingering long after the fire has passed. The nuclear war is over, only because there is nothing left to fight for. The land is broken, the sky broken, the water broken. The world counts its dead silently, continuously, endlessly waiting for what will never come again. A patience born of destruction, a permanence born of fire, a horizon that stretches gray, heavy, empty, and eternal. The ash still falls over continents. Rivers carry remnants of everything burned into them. Chemicals and dust from countless detonations flow together, crossing borders that no longer matter. Oceans swell with debris from every country, seas full of floating steel and plastic, and the bones of what survived storms rage unpredictably. Hurricanes born from sudden heat waves smash coasts that were already weakened. Radiation drifts silently carried by winds over mountains, plains and deserts, invisible and relentless. It seeps into soil where crops might have grown, where life might have tried to return. Even animals that survived the first strikes succumb slowly to sickness and starvation. Predators and prey alike vanish together. The forests that remained after the initial fire are now skeletal trunks, black and smoldering. The wildlife that adapted cannot cope with the heat. The poison, the emptiness, cities that were spared the initial blasts collapse. Under secondary fires, electrical storms, lightning strikes ignite. What remains, the air tastes metallic everywhere. Sunlight is dimmed by layers of smoke and ash. Reflections on shattered glass make the world seem like water upside down. Ghost rivers of streets and buildings. No one walks through. The deserts of former nations are coated in a fine layer of dust. Fallout from the strikes settles over every mountain ridge and valley. The land remembers each explosion in craters, fissures, scorched plains. Even where bombs did not hit directly, the shockwaves, heat, radiation, and panic shaped the terrain beyond recognition. Governments that once issued threats are gone, alliances meaningless. The nations that argued over borders, over ideology, are indistinguishable. In ruin, the ocean currents now carry radiation far beyond coasts. Thousands of miles from the initial blasts, the air is dense with invisible particles that cling to everything people built. Everything they loved is gone, infrastructure melted, warped, twisted. No bridges, no trains, no planes. The remnants of roads buried in ash dust storms sweep across regions once fertile, carrying the scent of fire and death. Every storm is tinged with a ghostly glow from the heat that lingers in the atmosphere. Some clouds burn faintly from residual radioactive energy. Shadows are distorted by lingering heat waves. The nights are dim and unnatural. The stars obscured by a thick haze. Sunlight filtered through layers of smoke barely reaches the ground temperature. Swings violently, scorching some regions, freezing others. Frost where it should never form, sudden heat in the wrong season. The air is heavier with each passing day. The soil leaches poison into streams, into reservoirs where people and animals once drank. Insects that survived hide or die quickly. Microbial life mutates in the soil. Rivers bring faint echoes of war across continents. Everything is connected in devastation. The world itself seems to shiver under the memory of the bombs. The nuclear war reshaped not just the land, but the climate, the water, the life it reached deeper than any bullet, deeper than any artillery. The echoes of conflict linger in the bones of the earth, in every puddle, every gust of wind, every smoldering ruin. 1 month in, and nothing has healed. The world waits in slow, radioactive patience for what might never come. Hope and life are whispers carried on poisoned air. But even whispers bend the landscape. Rivers carry them mountains, hold them valleys, echo them continents, remember in silence. 1 month after the nuclear war, the settlements lie empty. Streets twisted and shattered, vehicles fused to the ground like molten metal buildings. Hollowed out by fire, walls collapsed into themselves, doors hanging open to nothing. The remnants of human life scattered and frozen in time. Ash covers what was once movement. Everything is coated in gray. Silence. Power grids are gone, leaving blackened poles and tangled wires, electricity dead for weeks. No communication, no signals from other regions. Borders are meaningless lines on forgotten maps. Governments that once gave orders have vanished. Alliances dissolved under the weight of destruction. Currency has no value. Supplies rotting or stolen long ago. Markets stripped bare. Every container and warehouse gutted. Chaos passed through. Even before the bombs fell, bridges and roads destroyed, leaving isolated pockets of ruin. Only some areas spared the direct blast. But even their collapse spreads slowly. Food cannot be grown safely. Water is poisoned or trapped in broken pipes. Wells contaminated, every vessel a hazard. The knowledge of farming, medicine, even simple tools, now mostly useless. The people who survived are shadows moving between debris, scavenging what they can. Small enclaves hidden in basements or underground tunnels, makeshift shelters cobbled together from rubble and boards. The noise of other humans is rare. The echoes of voices long gone hang in empty rooms. Stairs collapse under weight floors, hollowed by fire and neglect. The world is quieter than ever. Each settlement a memory of activity frozen in ash libraries, filled with burned pages. schools reduced to skeletons of walls, hospitals, unusable equipment melted or scattered. The smell of smoke and death still lingers over entire regions. Communication networks shattered. Satellites burned or drifted uselessly in orbit. The knowledge of connection lost to most. No one travels far. Roads impassable. The landscape itself, a barrier people cling to. What small supplies remain scavenged from ruins. Canned food long expired, medicines, rarely effective. Clothing tattered or burned, the threat of radiation constant. Some move only at night for safety. Fear drives survival. The old systems of order, irrelevant morality bending under scarcity. Rumors of conflict between remaining survivors flare. Occasionally fights over water, over shelter, over food. The remnants of armies scattered into rogue cells. Weapons hoarded by small groups, old command posts, empty but dangerous with hidden mines and traps. Survivors have learned to navigate ruins carefully, every step a hazard, not from the environment only, but from other humans desperate to stay alive. Children rarely seen those that survived hide with adults, taught to avoid exposure. The elderly vanish. First bodies, unable to escape or adapt, lie in streets or rubble. Scavengers leave them untouched or burn what can't be carried. The culture of memory persists only in whispered fragments. Songs hummed quietly, drawings carved into walls, faint traces of what people once were. The world moves slowly through these pockets of life, only because instinct drives it. The social bonds that remained fractured and tenuous, cooperation, fragile and situational, humans adapt to the ruins themselves, moving between what was and what remains. The earth carries their traces in every ruined home, in every scorched field. The collapse is not total, but permanent survival is patchwork and precarious. The remnants of humanity exist like ghosts, navigating ruins that will never heal, waiting for a way forward or a reason to continue, yet stubbornly persisting 1 month in the silence, is thick, but alive in scattered whispers, in careful footsteps, in the flicker of movement through ash. 1 month after the nuclear war, the remnants of human thought drift like ash through empty streets. The memory of music and voices lingers faintly in ruined buildings. Songs hummed quietly long ago, carved into walls, or scrawled in dust fragments of books burned or buried in rubble. Words half erased, poetry, unfinished sketches half hidden under debris. The culture of the world persists only in pieces now, in faint echoes. A child's drawing on a cracked wall, the broken handle of a musical instrument, the faded cover of a book lying in the dust. The collective memory of millions reduced to shadows. People remember the taste of familiar foods, the sound of laughter and argument, the warmth of touch, the feeling of sunlight on skin now replaced by gray light, and heavy air rituals and celebrations are gone. Only traces remain: a calendar, burned in half a charred candle stub in a ruined house, images on walls scorched or blackened. The human mind struggles to keep what it once valued alive, even as survival dominates. Small gestures preserve memory. A jar of seeds kept, even if useless. A journal hidden under rubble. A drawing on a wall. The smells, the textures, the colors remembered in fragments echo in minds conditioned to survival. The loss of connection is absolute, letters unreadable. Photographs melted or warped. Communication now whispers through scattered survivors, or the imagination. The stories of the old world replay in thought alone. The arts are dead in form, but alive in memory. Melodies hummed quietly in darkness. Tales reconstructed from fragments. Half-remembered customs repeated in tiny acts. The psychological weight of everything lost presses on survivors like ash on skin. The past is vivid and inaccessible at once. Grief and nostalgia intertwine and multiply. Fear and memory coexist. The mind becomes a landscape of ruins reflecting the outside world, interiors as shattered as the cities. The cultural imprint of humanity persists as haunting residue, not in structures but in thought, in emotion, in tiny defiant acts. The human spirit clings to what cannot be burned, even as the world is destroyed. Every fragment of art, every whispered story, every remembered song is a rebellion against complete erasure, even 1 month after the nuclear war. Humanity's psyche bears the scars of the events, and yet remembers the beauty and complexity that preceded it. Memory itself becomes survival, and silence becomes the medium through which culture continues to exist without audience, without structure, without hope. The nations that once ruled the world are shadows scattered in ruin, empires reduced to ash and memory, their influence gone, the old powers fractured, their borders meaningless lines on maps that no longer matter. Alliances dissolved under fire, and radiation agreements forgotten. Treaties burned, governments gone. The weapons that defined supremacy now lie dormant or scattered in hidden bunkers, rusting, forgotten, or pulsing faintly with failing power. Isolated command posts hold nothing but ash, dust, or the occasional pulse of machinery that groans under radiation, and age corridors, once alive with orders, now echo only with silence. Some military remnants roam the wastelands. Rogue cells moving cautiously across scorched plains and ruined cities, holding stockpiles of explosives and firearms, relics of old conflicts, ready to be used for survival, control, or desperation. Remnants of governments attempt to enforce order in the absence of law, but fail quickly. Their commands meaningless when there is no infrastructure to support them, no citizens to heed orders, no communication to coordinate with other survivors. These cells scavenge, adapt, or dissolve as resources run thin, alliances fracture, and radiation or fire take what remains. The knowledge and strategy of entire nations exists now only in fragments, in the memories of a few hardened individuals, and in the decaying manuals and schematics that litter ruined command posts. Power is no longer centralized, but scattered survival in small enclaves. The ability to improvise and sheer force of will define influence. The old flags lie tattered, charred, or buried. Symbols of ambition and conflict now meaningless. The land itself remembers the fire and radiation, every destroyed city, every cratered battlefield, every scorched forest a record of past supremacy and current futility. The remnants of human authority are as fragile as the humans themselves, existing only briefly before nature. Radiation and chaos reclaim what was once claimed. Localized conflicts flare over water, food, and shelter. Small disputes erupt into violence, survival instincts overriding cooperation with no larger structure to mediate old alliances and treaties evaporated. Meaningless in the ruins, the world is an anarchic landscape, law replaced by instinct, force, and desperation. Fragments of intelligence networks still function, faintly, occasionally transmitting encrypted messages drifting uselessly through ruined satellites, signals flickering in and out, carrying knowledge that no one can act upon the map is meaningless. Each country defined only by where people survived the nuclear fire, borders ignored, lines on paper irrelevant where radiation, fire, and famine claimed millions. Some regions are heavily irradiated, uninhabitable for decades or longer, wastelands where nothing survives, others lightly scarred but cut off entirely from trade, communication, or travel, isolated pockets of humanity trapped in ruins or small enclaves with no way to reach the outside world. The ocean currents carry radiation from one coast to another, spreading contamination far beyond the original targets, poisoning water, soil, and marine life currents unpredictable, shifting debris, radioactive sediment, and chemical poison across thousands of miles. Survivors moving along rivers or coasts risk invisible threats, the tides and winds carrying unseen death. The remnants of cities, ports, and infrastructure litter the landscape like grave markers, each one a warning and a reminder of human fragility. Localized conflicts arise wherever resources concentrate, survivors desperate, improvising weapons from rubble, scavenging tools, defending small shelters from one another. Chaos replaces governance. The world is fragmented, anarchic, radioactive, and unpredictable. Survival exists only in fleeting moments, measured by the ability to move, to hide, to adapt, and to endure every interaction, a calculation, every action a risk. The environment itself, a participant in the struggle, shaping humanity as much as humans shape each other in this new, broken landscape. The old superpowers that once threatened each other are now indistinguishable in ruin. Smaller nations that survived direct strikes face collapse, from famine, disease, and exposure borders meaningless but lines of control attempted by desperate factions. Weapons caches are hoarded, secreted away underground, guarded jealously by whoever can still wield authority, even if authority has no legitimacy. The memory of war shapes everything. Survivors move cautiously, aware that small-scale attacks can come from anyone isolated. Radio bursts hint at scattered groups claiming territory or resources. Conflicts flare and die as quickly as they arise. The global economy no longer exists. Trade impossible, supply chains. Obliterated famine follows in waves. Pockets of survivors compete for what remains. Law is local, brutal, survival, often violent. The remnants of military infrastructure litter the landscape. Satellite stations, bunkers, launch silos, radar arrays abandoned or repurposed by whoever survives, sometimes scavenged for food, fuel, or shelter. Old naval vessels drift unmanned nuclear submarines silently moored, unaccounted for weapons once designed to enforce power, now hidden dangers to anyone nearby. The memory of diplomacy is meaningless. The world is divided only by devastation and radiation, each conflict now a microcosm of the larger war that already ended the Earth itself, marks the boundaries humans no longer control, the consequences of their weapons. Fallout drifts across borders. They never intended to cross countries. Fight silently through the environment itself. Radiation, poison, contaminated water, and ash define new territories. No nation can claim them. All the balance of power is gone. Only pockets of force remain, each fragile, unstable, temporary. 1 month in the nuclear war has erased governments, armies, treaties, borders, and left a world where conflict continues quietly, invisibly, everywhere, carried on the wind, in rivers, and in the desperate actions of the few survivors. The nuclear war, the world itself, begins to change in ways that are slow but relentless. Radiation seeps into soil and water, altering life at a microscopic level. Microbes mutate, adapting to poison plants struggle to grow in blackened soil. Some sprout only to wither instantly. Seeds buried deep sometimes survive. But the growth is twisted, deformed. The forests that survived fires attempt regrowth. But each tree is scarred and fragile. New sprouts emerge with brittle leaves or mutated shapes. Rivers carry not just debris, but chemical changes that shift the aquatic life that remains small. Fish survive in pockets, but in altered forms. Algae blooms thicken. Colors strange and luminescent in the pale sunlight, the oceans churn with heat, and radiation currents shift unpredictably, carrying contamination far beyond the coasts. Waves erode coastlines differently than before. Storms strike where they should not, sudden hurricanes, and heat storms born of altered climate patterns lash the remains of the world. Debris swept into the seas, into the plains, into valleys. The mountains hold scars from explosions, but also shelter slow attempts of vegetation to grow in fissures. Craters, hidden valleys. Animals mutate in response to scarcity and radiation, some small rodents with unusual coloration. Fur-thin or mottled insects that survive only in pockets of shelter. Some birds avoid open skies, nesting in rubble or abandoned structures. Amphibians slowly recolonize ponds and streams, but carry deformities. The wind carries dust laced with radioactive particles. Every gust reshapes surfaces, sometimes revealing new fissures, cracks, or buried remnants. Soil shifts as erosion takes hold more quickly. Without plant life to hold it, storms deposit layers of ash, unevenly creating mini landscapes of powder and glass. The climate itself is unstable. Heat waves followed by cold snaps. Acid rains falling unpredictably, the sun, a pale constant filtered through lingering smoke and haze. The air smells metallic everywhere. Shadows distorted by rising heat from fissures. Even 1 month in these changes are faint, but pervasive. The world is already different than before. The blasts, the biological memory of life, tries to push forward. Even as the chemical memory of destruction holds it back, some areas show signs of slow adaptation. Grass struggling through ash, fungi colonizing poisoned soil, hardy plants seeding in cracks between ruins. This transformation is uneven. Some regions sterile, others showing mutated resilience. Evolution accelerated by catastrophe. The world begins to write a new story in its own language, in every tree, every stone, every drop of water. The nuclear war has forced the Earth into a state of experimentation. The rules that once governed life are suspended. Survival becomes mutation, and adaptation becomes permanent. The landscape breathes differently, slowly, unpredictably, carrying the scars of fire and the pulse of new forms unseen by anyone left to witness. 1 month after the nuclear war, humans exist only in scattered pockets, moving through ruins, scavenging what they can find, anything that can sustain life: canned food, bottled water, scraps of clothing, containers of fuel. Whatever survives the fire and the radiation is taken and reused. Small groups cluster where shelter can be found. Abandoned basements, melted buildings, collapsed bridges, makeshift barricades protect against wind, ash, and other survivors desperate for the same resources. Movements are calculated, each step measured. Danger lies everywhere. The soil is poisoned, water risky to drink, radiation constant, each breath carries risk. Even the act of moving across open land can be fatal. People adapt their routines to the environment scavenging, at night or under cover, to avoid heat and exposure. Food is hunted or foraged cautiously. Small animals, fungi, roots, sometimes only to be discarded if poisoned shelters are fortified with debris. Scavenged boards, concrete slabs, and twisted metal fires are kept low to avoid attracting attention or sparks that could ignite remaining structures. Communication is rare. Whispers or signals among small groups to avoid detection. Tools and weapons are improvised from scraps, knives forged from metal fragments, clubs from broken beams, traps laid for animals or protection against others. Medicine is scarce herbs, and improvised remedies attempt to combat injury or illness. Injuries become more dangerous due to lack of professional care. Disease spreads rapidly without containment or sanitation. Children rarely survive the first weeks alone. They are hidden or moved constantly. If any remain, the elderly are equally at risk, immobile, or too weak to adapt to sudden environmental hazards. Travel is necessary even if dangerous movement between shelter sites is a test of endurance. The wind carries ash and radiation in unpredictable patterns. Survivors learn to read it as a guide to safe passage. The nights are used for scavenging, repairs, or rest. Days mostly spent hidden. Survival is constant calculation. Every decision weighted with risk and necessity. Social bonds are fragile but crucial. Small alliances form to share tasks. Food, defense, and information trust is rare and earned slowly. The environment itself enforces discipline. Only those who adapt persist. Some attempt agriculture in small protected plots, but soil often kills seeds before they can grow. Improvisation is essential. Containers collect rainwater filtered through cloth or sand. Fires used to purify water wherever possible. Scavenged solar panels or batteries sometimes provide minimal power for lights or tools. The nuclear war has reduced life to basic instincts, the pursuit of warmth, food, safety, and movement. The psychological strain is immense, fear and exhaustion. Constant companions hope. A fragile thread driving continued action. Every discovery of usable resources sparks fleeting relief. The world is harsh and unforgiving, but humans persist despite everything, learning to move, adapt, hide, and endure. Instinct merging with necessity. 1 month in humanity clings to survival in the ruins. A fragile, precarious persistence across an irradiated, altered, and broken landscape. 1 month after the nuclear war, the world holds its breath. The ash still falls over plains, mountains, rivers, carrying memories of fire and destruction. Every surface coated gray, every horizon blurred. The rivers are thick with debris and chemicals, dragging ash, charred vegetation, and remnants of civilization along their currents. The oceans churn, carrying remnants from all coasts. Broken ships, splintered docks, and floating wreckage caught in restless waves. Storms rage unpredictably. Hurricanes and heat waves, born from the fractured climate, lash the land with sudden fury, uprooting weakened trees and tearing at ruined structures. Lightning strikes skeletal forests, setting them ablaze again and again. The forests themselves attempt recovery, but the soil resists. Life seeds buried deep struggle to sprout, while surface soil remains poisoned and compacted. Microbial life mutated or destroyed wildlife that survived. The first blasts moves cautiously, often dying before reaching safety. Small pockets of vegetation fight to grow between cracked rocks and rubble, but are scorched by heat and radiation. Ash drifts into every valley and hollow, filling depressions and coating plant life with a gray metallic dust. The sky itself seems heavier than before, carrying the lingering smell of smoke and fire sunlight, filtered through layers of ash and chemical clouds, casts a dim, sickly glow over the scarred landscape. Rivers overflow their banks, with debris from distant regions carrying everything the fire could not consume. The ocean waves break unevenly against coastlines, dragging sand, soil, and rubble inland, reshaping what little remained of beaches and cliffs. The wind moves lazily, hesitantly, carrying with it the metallic tang of decay. The mountains hold smoldering fissures, releasing smoke into the already heavy sky. Every crater, every scar, every blackened slope, a record of human destruction, even in isolated valleys where soil is less poisoned. The memory of fire lingers, heating rocks, evaporating water, delaying regrowth. The silence of life is broken only by occasional collapses of weakened structures, the hiss of radiation escaping fissures, and the distant crash of unstable rivers into ruined terrain. The world is waiting in gray, radioactive patience, the balance of life suspended, fragile, and uncertain. Every gust of wind and every ripple in the water a reminder that survival is tentative, and every step forward must be measured against the scars of 1 month of unrelenting devastation. Seeds sprout only to wither. Animals mutate in pockets. Small rodents with strange coloration, insects adapted to poisoned soil, and larger creatures altered by radiation. Birds hide, avoiding open skies. Amphibians recolonize small ponds cautiously, moving only where water is less toxic. The human remnants are fragile, scattered survival in ruins, scavenging what can sustain life, remnants of food, water, clothing, and fuel, carried from one ruin to another. Small enclaves hidden in collapsed buildings or basements make temporary homes, constantly relocating to avoid dangers. Trust is rare, alliances fleeting, temporary partnerships formed out of necessity, foraging together, defending one another from the unpredictable threats of both environment and other survivors. Children are rare, often hidden by adults for protection, while the elderly fade, their movements slow, their presence vulnerable. The culture of humanity survives only in fragments. Songs hummed quietly in empty rooms, drawings etched into walls to mark a memory or a moment, books half burned yet clinging to their stories, musical instruments warped by heat and neglect. Memory itself becomes the vessel of art and history, carrying knowledge, emotion, and experience in tiny surviving pockets. Governments dissolved, borders meaningless, old alliances gone, leaving no structure or authority. Weapons lie scattered, improvised, or abandoned. Conflicts small and local, micro-struggles echoing the global destruction from which they sprang. Every action measured, every step cautious. Scavenged food shared sparingly. Medicine rationed meticulously. Some try to cultivate small gardens in ruined soil, only to see seeds shrivel under radiation or acid rain. Forcing constant improvisation, children learn survival early, mimicking adults, their laughter rare. Cautious, brief humans move constantly, avoiding open ground, radiation hotspots, and unstable ruins. Every day is a calculation, a negotiation with a hostile landscape even within enclaves. Tension lingers as scarcity breeds conflict, yet necessity maintains fragile cooperation. Every surviving fragment of culture, hummed melodies, written words, half-repaired instruments, becomes a connection to a world that no longer exists, a fragile thread keeping humanity tethered to memory, to art, to the notion that even in ruin something of civilization can endure. Humans adapt, endure, invent, survive, movement calculated, steps measured, risk constant survival instinct merging with necessity, every action weighed against danger, every breath deliberate and precise, radiation lingers in the air, soil, and water, invisible, yet pervasive, seeping into every corner of life, forcing caution into instinct. Humans persist in cautious, deliberate rhythms, scavenging, foraging, improvising, building fragile shelters from debris, remnants of metal, wood, and stone. The world itself transforms slowly, reshaping itself through mutation, decay, and faint adaptation in flora and fauna. Forests struggle to regrow between fissures, charred and poisoned leaves sprouting only to blacken again. Small pockets of wildlife evolve or perish. Their existence precarious amphibians recolonize abandoned ponds. Insects mutate to survive poisoned soil, and birds flee or hide environmental change. Climate instability and long-lasting radiation force oceans and rivers into new courses, currents shifting debris and poison across continents, coastlines altered by sudden storms, tidal surges, and subsidence long-term shifts, marking the planet irreversibly cracks in the soil. Fissures in mountains and scarred riverbeds stand as evidence of human destruction. The nuclear war has reshaped everything, humanity itself reduced to fragments, yet 1 month in life clings to ruins, and ash, survival, becomes both instinct and ritual. Every breath a measure of resistance, every cautious step a defiance against oblivion, every fragment preserved, seed, scrap, memory, is a testament to persistence against complete erasure. Small fires burn in hidden shelters, smoke rising only slightly, signaling both survival and vulnerability. Humans invent tools, weapons, and traps from scavenged materials. They repurpose remnants of civilization into necessities, creativity, and instinct. Intertwined, mutation occurs not only in nature, but in human behavior. Habits adapt to scarcity, danger, and radiation. The landscape itself enforces the rules, forcing movement along paths of least risk. Knowledge passes silently, shared only through gestures, signals, and whispered instructions, even in isolation. Humans carry memory, culture, and the will to endure. The ruined world itself is alive with change. And yet life persists stubbornly, imperfectly, irreversibly, defying the attempt to erase it completely. Every cautious step across ash, debris, and poisoned water becomes both survival and resistance. Every breath taken in this altered, scarred environment is a small victory. Every preserved fragment, whether tool, seed, or memory, a testament to the persistence of life and humanity against the immense, unrelenting weight of destruction. The signal itself is faint, carrying through the gray static, a testament to persistence, even if unheard, a fragile thread connecting the remnants of a world broken yet still alive. The world waits in radioactive patience, every gust of wind moving ash across valleys and plains, every ripple in rivers carrying the weight of destruction. Humans enduring where possible, scavenging, hiding, improvising in the ruins, while the earth itself remembers what was. Every scar, every fissure, every crater, a record of fire and radiation. The silence is thick, heavy, alive yet fragile, resonating through empty streets, hollowed forests, and abandoned coastlines, every element bearing scars of fire, and fallout every mountain, river, forest, and plain marked by human folly and nuclear fire, the story of humanity reduced to fragment survival, memory, mutation, and adaptation, each fragment preserved a defiance against oblivion. The broadcasts end not with certainty, only with the hum of continuity, faint, persistent, threading through poisoned air, ash-laden winds and toxic waters. The ash will fall continuously, dusting plains, mountains, rivers, and oceans. The rivers will flow carrying debris, chemical poison, and remnants of both life and destruction to lands far from the blasts. The winds will shift unpredictably, scattering ash, sediment, and fragments across the globe. The animals will adapt in hidden pockets, evolving or fleeing where possible. The humans will survive through caution, improvisation, and stubbornness, enduring in small enclaves, learning, inventing, resisting. The earth will remember the fire and the radiation in every scar, every fissure, every warped landscape. The echo of destruction and resilience persists through every broken city, every scorched forest, every crater, every ruined coast, marking the planet with memory, warning, and endurance. The signal itself, weak yet unbroken, threads through the gray static, carrying the story forward, the last traces of human thought, memory, and resistance across a world that continues to shift, change, decay, and survive. This is the last signal radio, the story of what remains, what adapts, what persists, a record of survival and decay, of human and planetary endurance, a record that will continue until even the signal fades into the gray, leaving only memory, ash, and the persistent pulse of a planet forever changed.